Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 19 of Coloring Outside the Box. And it's time for Star Trek. And this time around, we're talking about what it's going to be like as we travel through the sign of Sagittarius. Now, generally, when the sun moves into Sagittarius, there's a lifting of the mood as we come out of Scorpio, which has always taken us into the darkness and into the depths. So when we hit Sagittarius, it's time to bring whatever we have learned during that period of time or experienced during that period of time and use it as a tool to open up to the future, to open up to what's next, to be prepared to broaden our horizons, expand our understanding. Now, this year, as we move through Sagittarius, it's really going to be a bit of a mixed bag. And what do I mean by that? Well, there are those inklings of hope, that feeling that we're emerging into something new, but we're still in a transitional phase. Or a liminal phase. And often we're in that space, in that place. We don't really know where we're going or what the heck is going on. And so we can get caught between what is, and this year what is hasn't been particularly how shall I say, enjoyable, and a sense of uncertainty that we don't know what's going to happen next. Now, Sagittarius isn't always too concerned about that because they do like adventure. That energy is all about seeking, questioning, and going farther than you've ever gone before. And it's a fire sign, so there's that lightness that comes, that energy that comes. And yet again, we are in a space and a place where we're looking for hope and we're looking for new ground to stand on. And yet everything still feels like the shifting sands of the Kalahari Desert. So here's the deal. It's going to be a powerful month. There's a lot going on. So if there are days when you feel a little bit schizophrenic, a little bit like up, down, and everything in between, don't be surprised and don't be hard on yourself. Just know that the prevailing energies seem so deeply contrasted that it's hard to find a middle ground on which you can actually plant your feet. And I don't mean plant your physical feet, although it could be that too. Plant your emotional, spiritual, intellectual feet. Because we know that all four of our bodies are connected, and that paying attention to one aspect of our lives puts everything else off kilter. And really, that's what 2020 has been about. It's been a massive experience in what it's like to be off kilter almost every day. So here we are. So a couple of things. We have two eclipses this month, which herald the new beginning, but also challenge us to be clear about what in our past needs releasing. Because that's what eclipses are about. They're about taking us into spaces and places where we can look at where we're going and also where we've been, but not for the purposes of planting our flags in where we've been, but to take the past and heal it, release it, clarify it, whatever needs to be done. And because we're talking about the moon, whenever we're talking about eclipse, we're always talking about the moon, whether we're talking about a full moon or a new moon. And whenever we're talking about the moon, we're talking about habits, patterns, comfort zones, all those things. So first we're going to talk about the full moon, because as we have discussed in the last 2 or 3 months, the cycle now, when we're in a sign, is opposite to what we would normally think of. So we're going to have a full moon on November 30th in the sign of Gemini. And so this is going to be an opportunity for us we're trying to make logical sense of what's been going on. And the challenge when we have a full moon in an air sign is it can either bring confusion as we try to figure out what we're supposed to attach ourselves to. Is it thoughts or feelings? Or a face-off between those two things? So in one instance, there's a jumble of things going on, and in the other instance, thoughts are on one side, feelings are on the other, and never the twain shall meet. So whenever we have a lunar eclipse that involves an air sign, this is a time of understanding that we need to integrate thoughts and feelings. And when it's the full moon, that is the challenge. Not to ignore your feelings, but not to ignore your thoughts either. So during this particular full moon, there's going to be a long and hard, that didn't come out right, an intense need to find some facts that make sense to us. Because air signs have a quality of logic to them. Now, of course, this eclipse is very much connected to Mercury, which is the sign of communication. So again, that need to find facts. However, because it's in the sign of Scorpio, that's where the conflict comes in between thoughts and feelings. So make sure that whatever facts or information that you embrace, looking at my notes, actually is helpful to you, that broadens your perspective and deepens your awareness, rather than a defense against uncertainty. Because we're living with a lot of uncertainty, and there are days when we just want something to make sense to us. So part of a full moon in Gemini is about gathering information. And with that Mercury in Scorpio, sorting the wheat from the chaff. But also not overriding, your instincts, because the moon is instinctual, and we often want to discount that. So again, here's the rub between thoughts and feelings. So it can be a time of facing reality. Just looking at it clearly without attaching too much fear to it, because fear is rampant these days. Just look at the facts. Look at the information. Does it expand your life? Does it give you a sense that, that there's something that you can work with? Because life is about bringing the internal and the external together, and one of the ways we do that is through thoughts and feelings. I hope that made sense. Otherwise, you're going to feel like you're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. So again, it's separating the wheat from the chaff. Recognizing if you're attaching yourself to a piece of information, listen to your body. What does it tell you as you think about that? Because your body will never lie to you. It will always tell you the truth by that sense, that feeling that you get when something crosses your path. And just know there is a lot of fear around right now. And if you're feeling afraid off and on, that in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's more a case, or a thing at all. That didn't come out right. The key is, again, when you feel something, what does it tell you? Where is it taking you? And when we're talking about eclipses, we're setting up a dynamic for the next at least 6 months. Okay, so now let's talk about the new moon. And the new moon is a total solar eclipse in the sign of Sagittarius, and that happens on December the 14th. Let that sink in for a second. So the future really is going to be calling to us, right? Because, again, Sagittarius is about hope and optimism. It's about freedom. It's about liberation, all of those things. And so we're going to feel this, you will feel hope and optimism, and you think that things might finally be at least lessening. I caution all of us not to jump to conclusions that this is going to solve a whole bunch of things, because it's talking about a 6-month and possibly a year-long emergence into a new beginning. But again, remember, it's the new moon, the new moon, and the new moon is about emerging possibilities. It's not, it is not manifest yet. It's not in form yet. It's beginning. And at the same time, that particular eclipse, the boss of that eclipse is Jupiter. And Jupiter's in the very last degree of Capricorn. Now, I know I'm talking a little bit of astrology today, and I hope you'll bear with me. There's a reason for this. So whenever a planet is at 29 degrees, it indicates you've got one foot on the brake and the other foot on the gas pedal. So there is a change coming, and it's just about a week away when the sun moves into Capricorn, but we're not there yet. And the prevailing energies at this time, there are a number of planets in late degrees in the signs that they're in. So that indicates there's a lot of stuff that needs to be cleared out, cleaned out. And the analogy I like to use is you cannot embrace the future if there's a bunch of leftovers in your internal refrigerator. And we all accumulate things. We all accumulate emotions and experiences throughout the course of our lives. And as we head towards that new beginning on December the 21st, shortly after the sun goes into Capricorn, as we head towards it, we really need to be clear about what needs to go. And it could be thoughts, it could be ideas, it could be feelings, it could be, we're all going to feel a little clenched at the same time as we're trying to open up. Just know that that beginning is coming, and don't back yourself into a corner by pushing away anything that's uncomfortable. So you need to rethink what guides you, and remember, it's not about being right, because that's one of the other things about Sagittarius is often fire signs are like, they want to be right. It's not about being right. It's about being open and accountable. And I want to say, sometimes our need to be right masks some deeper fear that we have. And I know that we often think that if we're right about something, that somehow that makes it easier or better. And it really doesn't. Again, it's about being open and accountable. So now we're going to move on to twinkles. And I want to say that, there is that glimmer of hope. However, we are still going to feel, as we cross the threshold, sorry about the tongue, as you cross the threshold into Sagittarius, it's still going to feel kind of heavy. Again, similar to what I just said about the new moon. Stuff is gathering to be released. So if you feel a lot of internal pressure, it's not, the purpose of it isn't to make your life miserable. I didn't say you don't feel miserable. Throughout the course of human history, when we've reached turning points in human history, and we are heading towards one, there has been a huge outer challenge to our survival. And, we're dealing with not just physical survival, we're dealing with financial survival, and which is also connected to the physical, but there's also a spiritual, emotional content aspect to this. That is why this year has been so challenging, because it hasn't felt like there's been any let up. Maybe throughout the summer, we lulled ourselves into a false sense of complacency. And remember, I was talking about facts and which ones help and which ones don't. Well, it can often be hard for us to accept the fact that acknowledging what really is going on, even if it's overwhelming and terrifying, is still more supportive of our overall well-being than ignoring the truth, because whether we're consciously prepared to acknowledge it, our actual physical body and the other aspects of our consciousness are quite well aware what's going on, no matter what our conscious mind conjures up in an effort to help us deal with things. And sometimes we think of avoidance and denial are great coping strategies. And they might be for a short period of time, but in the long term, and especially in this year, that is not going to really assist anyone. And I know that sounds rather emphatic, because it is. I would add to that by saying that know that inside you are a lot of inner resources. And you may not always be aware of them, because we're so busy always looking at this day and that day and what needs to happen and where does this need to go. And we often don't think about where the fuel comes from for all of that activity. And sometimes we just do things on a hunch. Just feels right in the moment. Those are the things that will allow you to feel lighter this month. Also, cleaning out your internal refrigerator, your internal storage bin, storage unit, because we all have one. And some of us have accumulated quite a lot. I know I've discovered quite a bit of stuff I stored from a long time ago. So again, the key this month is to go within and create a balance between how much attention you pay to your external reality and how much time you take to nurture yourself internally. This doesn't have, and it's not complicated, even though it sounds complicated. Part of the challenge we face is that we have been taught that what goes on inside isn't nearly as important as what goes on out there. And yet when push comes to shove and we need to draw on something to carry us forward, it's what's in here that does that. It manifests itself outwardly, but it comes from within. So this act of cleansing and purifying is liberating, and it brings with it light and ease. Now, I want to make it clear, ease is not the same as easy. Ease, it means you clear the path for yourself rather than piling up more obstacles to be overcome. Let that sink in. And I want to thank my friend Tammy Pocock for explaining the difference to me between ease and easy. So again, let me explain. So it's like, to give you an example, and a simple one. When you are, oh God, I'm trying to think of a cooking reference and I'm not sure that's actually going to work. So here's the deal. So you could go into the kitchen and decide you're going to make, say, a ginger cake. And you've never made one before. You're not even sure what the ingredients are. So you could decide to just be overwhelmed by the fact that you've never done it before, or you can seek the resources to help you. Sometimes those resources come from outside. So in order to clear yourself up, maybe going for a workout and listening to music takes you within and allows your consciousness to release all the worry and concern about what's happening outside yourself, because there's a lot going on this year that we don't have any control over. I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. Again, I just want to say, you just know you have the tools within to make the shift that's coming. And really, this is about trusting yourself. So in this particular trip through Sagittarius, this is about trusting yourself. And that's what going within allows you to do. Now, the challenge for us is often we've been taught since we were small to trust others before we trust ourselves. So black holes, oh joy, right? And this is what I wrote. It really is hard to run away from the challenges and the obstacles and the difficulties and the general overwhelm that we've experienced in 2020. I describe it, it's mesmerizing and yet uncomfortable in the extreme. It's like living on the edge of a cliff with nowhere to go but over the edge. That's what it feels like. Off and on, not all the time, but off and on. So we feel powerless and we feel that this is inevitable. Now, that may not be everybody, but I'd be surprised if anyone listening to this podcast hasn't had moments like that this year, wondering, is this ever going to end? I really don't like to say this, but that's going to intensify this month. Because as I said before, we have a lot of planets and late degrees of signs telling us that we need to clean our act up. It doesn't mean that, so let me rephrase it. It's not that you've done anything wrong. It's more a case of we all accumulate stuff that doesn't serve us. There isn't a single human on the planet that doesn't do that. And so part of the growth of being human is always recalibrating yourself, transforming yourself, growing yourself. And in order to do that, you really need to be aware of what isn't working. Not what's right or wrong, not what's good or bad, not what's success or failure, just what's working and what's not working. It's so much easier to look at it that way. And as we deal with this month, again, the message is go within. Now, that's something we don't often, I've talked about this before, see as necessary or even valuable, but this month it absolutely is. And just think, along the way, you're going to learn some really fantastic things about yourself. No matter what those things are. Again, don't put them in a category, just be aware. And that is the hardest thing. And that is one of the gifts of Sagittarius, is seeking awareness. Okay. So here we are. We're at deep space. And I know it feels like we've just been living in deep space all of 2020, and it's true, we have. This has been a whole thing about demanding, pushing you to go inside, to know that what makes you human, what creates your life, is actually what emerges from within. And if you understand that, you can create more opportunities for yourself. That we can't, this year has all been about recognizing we can't control everything. And asking ourselves, is it even desirable or necessary? Because there is a difference between taking charge and taking control. Control is based on fear. And it's hard to even this year to even anticipate what is going to happen. I know I've had many people say to me, so what's 2021 going to be like? And I'll be talking a little bit more about that, sharing that next month as we move into 2021. I just know there's a shift taking place, and that part of facilitating that shift for yourself is the capacity to listen to yourself, to trust yourself. Because that's one thing about fire signs, all of them, they trust themselves. So whenever we're journeying through a fire sign, there is always a message of learning to trust yourself. Trust that you will know what to do. For most of us, this is an unparalleled challenge on all frequencies. And it's been hard to figure out exactly how trying to knit things back together when we can't do that. That's not what this year is about. It's preparing ourselves for a new world that we don't know what it's going to look like. And along the way, we have to look not just personally, but as a global community, look at the things about human behavior that don't work. And not to be overwhelmed by it. Because we do have some big problems to solve, big challenges to solve. And there's an indication as we move towards the end of this year that the seeds are being planted. And of course, I'm talking, for those of you who know astrology, about the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in Aquarius. And let me remind everybody, that is a new phase. So there is a shift, a major shift in our approach to life, in the way we approach the idea of community, the idea of connecting to other human beings, trying to find integration and bridges. Now, it's always a challenge for humans to okay, sometimes words fail me, believe it or not. Because we've been taught to look outside ourselves for the source of our problems, it's really hard for us to recognize that when we project our crap outside ourselves, and that's part of what this month is about, is looking at what it is you believe, why you believe it, and what impact that actually has on you. Because energetically, finding fault, being intolerant affects us probably more than it affects whoever it is we're projecting on or being intolerant towards. We really are in a space and a place where we need to accept that things are going to change and shift dramatically. Not overnight, but still. And to embrace those changes and to ask ourselves, how will this add to my life? Not how will it take away from my life, but how will it add to my life? And on that note, I want to wish you a happy journey through Sagittarius. And I know you're wondering, why am I saying the word happy? Well, there is a lot of research that indicates that happiness is a choice. So I challenge you to find something in every day that brings a smile to your face, that allows those happy hormones, the hormones that make us happy, or is it anyway, to course through our body. And remind ourselves that we weren't just put here to be tortured. Or better phrase it, we didn't choose to come here just to be tortured. Anyway, again, I want to thank you for joining me for episode 18 of Coloring Outside the Box. I look forward to sharing my thoughts about Capricorn and somewhere around just before Christmas. And there will be a podcast in between. And of course, I don't know what the subject matter is going to be because it hasn't presented itself yet. Anyways, thanks again. Please take care. Much love. Bye-bye.